If your system requires someone to remember, it will eventually break and it's costing you more than you think. If it requires someone to remember as a portion of the system. So, we see this from billing and how claims are filed. We see this for marketing and how ROI is calculated. We see this for websites updates, clinician onboarding. The hard truth is each one of the departments of your practice, if you want to scale to 3 million and beyond, needs to be systematized in a way that doesn't require person-to-person memory for the majority of the things. And if it does, your sanity is definitely at stake as a business owner because things will always be falling through the cracks.
You didn't start your practice to barely hang on. I'll guess you started it for freedom, impact, and profit. This is Therapy for Your Money. I'm your host, Julie Harris. I'm an accountant, author of Profit First for Therapists, and CEO of Green Oak Accounting. Over the years, my team and I have partnered with hundreds of private practice owners, whether they're just getting started, scaling into thriving groups, or even preparing to sell. We've seen it all, and we know exactly what makes a practice tick financially. On Therapy for Your Money, I'll help you build a business that truly works for you. You'll get quick, actionable tips and episodes so that you can grow a profitable practice, increase your financial confidence, and pay yourself unapologetically. Because your work is way too important for you to burn out or go broke doing it. Love the podcast? Make sure to follow and give us a 5-star review. Here is Therapy for Your Money. Hello and welcome to Therapy for Your Money. Today, we are talking about hidden bottlenecks for practices that are between 1 and 3 million in annual revenue. To chat with me today, I have the lovely one and only Joshua Brummel from Therapy Flow. Joshua, it's good to see you.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here and chat through practice growth.
Yeah, you're a frequent flyer of the podcast. And who better to talk about this topic with you? Your team and my team see a lot of practices in that revenue range, and a lot of the challenges that come with it. And I find that there's a tendency, as you get above that $1 million in revenue, to think like, oh, I've figured out all the problems, because there were definitely a lot of challenges to figure out in that building to $1 million in revenue, and yet a whole new slew of challenges awaits right behind that goalpost. So where do you want to start today?
I think it's important to note that if you're a practice owner that has hit or close to that $1 million mark, and then you're scaling to 3 million and beyond, this is a very unique business owner situation, industry agnostic. There's probably only about 9% of total businesses in America that crest over the $1 million mark. And I want to say about 6% only, or 5% that get above that $3 million mark. And so most businesses, and now small businesses to medium businesses, are below this point. So you're at a very unique space of things where you're in the top 10% or the top 5%. So your challenges are hard, are unique. And so some of the bottlenecks that you're going to experience are just going to be very different than the practice at 500K or 300K and some of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not a lot of people around you also to ask for advice, right? Just
Right.
because there's not that many practice owners who make it to that point. So what are some of the bottlenecks that you see, or at that point, maybe right when you hit $1 million in revenue?
Yeah. I think the first one we have to mention is, to hit $1 million in revenue is you have to have a large enough clinician team. And then if you're going to 2 or 3 million especially, that's a lot of bodies inside of your practice. So clinician churn starts to appear. That forever clinician for the small team, it dissipates and you start to lose 1, 2, 5, 10. One of the most common challenges I hear is, our revenue was awesome last year, but then 5 clinicians left us to move, to start their own practice, to go out on maternity leave, right? And so churn for your clinician team is a measurable number, which changes the mindset around what you need to do for hiring and for growth.
Yeah. I notice a lot that some of our clients will have a goal of, we want to grow by X number of clinicians next year, right? And that's a great goal. But what they often will forget to consider is that churn. So if you're growing by 8 clinicians and you're probably going to lose 5, that's significantly more clinicians to hire, right? You really need to be planning on hiring not one every 6 to 8 weeks, like one a month, or maybe even more, one every 3 weeks.
Yeah. Hiring good talent at scale in this case is a business owner skill that you don't have to have as much when you're smaller. Only having 3 or 4 clinicians that are just with you is different than saying, wow, how do I find 5, 10, 15 clinicians annually to fill these spots, fill their caseloads, and have this consistent hiring process?
Yes. And you really move from hiring as needed to hiring basically all the time, right? You are
Yeah.
almost always hiring. And that's a different mindset as well on how are you going to attract, interview, right? You have to have a lot more systems around that in order to make that successful. And really when you have a team, if you think of 50 clinicians, right? A $3 million practice really could have around 50 clinicians. It is reasonable to expect that 5 to 10 of them will leave in 1 year, right? In
Definitely.
2026, at least, like that is kind of what we often see somewhere in that number. I find gone are the days that people stay with you for 20 years, right?
Yep.
That's just not going to necessarily happen, and that's all right.
I used to do recruitment marketing for the Chicago Tribune. And so we were
Interesting.
doing a lot of consulting for organizations. And at that time, like nurse and nurse placement, still a very competitive field, but tons of pressure outside, just like now in the therapy space of hospitals, travel nurses, layers, right? Very competitive. There's lots of places for clinicians to go for lots of reasons, not just to move to another practice, but they switch careers, they open up a solo practice, they move to another org, they go on, paternity and maternity leave, they fill in the blank. So all to say is systems for recruitment emerge as a necessity for that always hiring process you just described.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What are some of the other hidden bottlenecks?
So we at Therapy Flow provide a CRM, which is just dashboards for lead tracking, lots of other things, and we run lots of marketing services. And so when our practices start to get bigger, helping them scale their marketing spend to fill their clinicians is impossible without clear ROI tracking, return on investment tracking. If you don't know how much money you're making back or how soon you will make your marketing dollars back, just simple numbers like CAC, your cost to acquire one client, or your overall ROI. We spent $10,000 on marketing last quarter, and we know we got this many leads or new intakes from it in the short term. You have no confidence to spend the money you need to scale from 1 to 3 million without ROI. So you're going to just be flying blind, and you're eventually going to crash your marketing ship, so to speak. You don't ever get strong clarity on ROI.
So who is responsible in the practice for tracking the ROI?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're working with a channel partner as a vendor, I'll start there. So let's say you work with Therapy Flow for Google Ads, or you work with a different vendor for SEO or mailing campaigns. If you work with a vendor, they should have a clear way to track return on investment for the marketing they're doing. If that vendor does not have a clear way to make that happen, find a new vendor for that marketing channel. They should be accountable to the tracking of the ROI they're getting for you.
Okay.
Internally, if you have a practice manager or you're the CEO who's still over marketing management, or you have a marketing manager internally, they should be running monthly reports on all of your marketing and all of your marketing channels to determine that return on investment.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out, you did not mention that it's the owner or the CEO who is tracking all of those things, right? It's certainly something that they are looking at, but I feel like as I heard you say that as a non-marketing person, I thought like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. But
Yeah.
it's really not necessarily the owner doing the tracking, just keeping an eye on the tracking. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd say if you have an internal team member, if you don't, someone has to do it. But again, that office manager, that's, coordinator, outreach person, someone who's adjacently touching, you can equip them with an SOP to pull reports and set up dashboards. And again, a good vendor will send you SEO ROI dashboards, Google Ads ROI dashboards, things like that. But for sure, if you're at 1.5 to 3 million in revenue, this should not be your day-to-day, month-to-month cycle to pull these reports yourself.
Yeah, you probably should be working with someone who is likely better at it than you are.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we wanted to talk about systems, and really, systems are not what you do. They're not what I do necessarily, but this is just an observation from us working with so many practice owners. Like you can get to a certain point, kind of willy nilly, where a lot of the information lives in your owner brain, and you have your arms kind of around everything. But beyond $1 million in revenue, there really is that threshold of it cannot live with you. And systems really can make or break your sanity, right?
Yeah. I heard someone say it the other day is if your system requires someone to remember, it will eventually break and it's costing you more than you think. If it requires someone to remember as a portion of the system. So, we see this from billing and how claims are filed. We see this for marketing and how ROI is calculated. We see this for websites updates, clinician onboarding. The hard truth is each one of the departments of your practice, if you want to scale to 3 million and beyond, needs to be systematized in a way that doesn't require person-to-person memory for the majority of the things. And if it
Yeah.
does, your sanity is definitely at stake as a business owner because things will always be falling through the cracks.
Yeah. I would also add that it requires visibility, right? The system requires you to be able to see
Mm.
what is going on, not just someone knows how to do it, but you can measure and observe and have clarity that it is actually happening, or else it can leave some really significant blind spots in the practice too.
Well, I know you have this for practices of all shapes and sizes, but when they first come to you for fractional CFO work, for getting their taxes in line for the first time, whatever stage of financial acumen they're about, you're providing visibility. And almost always there are hidden things or they feel very weighty for the financial pieces because they're confused, disoriented. And that, again, department to department across the board, if you're trying to scale to 3 million plus.
Yeah. Yeah. Also in that range of income, we notice on the accounting side that protecting your profit margin, that becomes a really important part of your CEO responsibility, right? There's that shift where up to $1 million a year in revenue, you might be working still in the business.
Yeah.
You may or may not be seeing clients. That really depends on the owner preference, right? Do they like the clinical work? Would they rather get out? But your role is just shifting so much more towards that of managing the business, right? Working on the business versus working in the business. And in 2026, it's definitely still possible to have a profitable practice. That's absolutely still possible, still doable, but it does require a lot of intentional thought. It's not happening by accident as much anymore, or almost never, right? You have to be constantly looking at the numbers. You have to understand what's going on financially. You have to understand if your accounts receivable is ballooning. You have to keep an eye on expenses. Those things do remain and they become a bigger part of your ultimate responsibility in order to make sure that that margin remains, because the profit margin can just shrink really, really quickly. It's very easy
Yeah.
to do, and then it's harder to get it back up after that
Yeah.
happens.
You have to spend a lot more time protecting yourself from mistakes that eat the margin is what I see. A couple years ago, we put a new floor into our home and I did it myself. It was the first time installing a floor. Overall went great, but I made a lot of mistakes in cutting floorboards and tiles, so there was just a lot more waste. And once I finished it all, I had to go buy a couple extra boxes I didn't plan for because of my mistakes versus the square footage. And so someone with more skill of putting that floor in, they wouldn't have made those mistakes. They would have had a cheaper out the door cost. Marketing, we see this a lot, is when we're doing marketing incorrectly, it costs us more. So it costs the
Mhm.
practice more. When we're doing intake with more mistakes, it costs us in more marketing for client, right? And we're talking about retention and recruitment. I see that same lesson being the unfortunate reality as the space gets more competitive and as your overall business is just trying to scale, again, in that small percent of businesses in America on this revenue size, you win by getting better at doing the thing you're doing. Otherwise, your profit will suffer. And that's what you have to keep an eye on as a CEO is holding the whole organization to standards that create profit.
Yeah. And to every decision, there really typically is a financial component to it, right? And so keeping an eye on that becomes that much more important because if, across hundreds of sessions, a decision that has a small financial impact becomes a really big financial impact if you're, making that decision across 30 clinicians or 1,000 sessions a month, right? That impact just becomes amplified and harder to roll back as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes to just an overall bottleneck that we see all the time, and that owners must outgrow small business mindset, either small business or clinician mindset, and step into an overall CEO work model of things.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a hard transition to make, right? Not for everyone, but for many. It requires you to become someone else and develop a new set of skill sets that you maybe did not have as a clinician. They're very complementary and it's all
Yeah.
learnable, but being a great CEO of a 25-person organization is a very different skill set than being just clinician, right? Those are
Yeah.
two very, very different things. And yet it's hard to get to that 3 million plus mark if you are not kind of becoming the person your business needs you to be.
I think one thing I see there when I'm doing consulting calls with practices that are having a hard time understanding where their time is supposed to go because they're trying to do a mix of things they enjoy still. So sometimes that looks like seeing clients or sometimes doing their own marketing because they actually like it. And I kind of give the advice that where your time goes during a growth season versus a stability season will be different. So if you do have the goal of going from 1 to 3 million, you might have to set aside all client sessions for, a year or a couple of years. You might have to set aside filling your time with certain things that you love, or you might have to fill it with things you love less to make it happen. But let's say you're trying to sustain your practice that's already at 3 million, you might be able to put things back on your calendar for the sake of joy, for the sake of running your business that you might want. So my only advice is some of those CEO actions or letting go of certain things you love when your practice was smaller, they can reappear on the other side of growth. And we just have to be aware that it's not permanent.
Yes, true. And I think it's a good idea to put some very intentional time on your calendar for some of those CEO activities, right? That might include meeting with your marketing team. That might include meeting with your fractional CFO, right? Like just spending an hour, really a month, looking at what's going on in the business can be really, really helpful. And
Yeah.
that segues really well to our next point, which is really in that growth space it is very, very rare for a practice owner to be DIYing everything, right? Usually in order to scale to that point, you really are going to need that circle of trusted advisors because you don't need to know all the things, but you need to know who to call when something is going wrong and something will go wrong, right?
Yeah. I think this is a really big hidden bottleneck because I've experienced this as my business has gone through some of these revenue numbers. You often need to pay for that trusted advisor or try and secure that relation before you think you need to, or
Mm.
before it feels comfortable to pay that money out the door. I remember the first year I got, a big actual tax advisor and some of those things. It cost me a lot more than what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
And that cost has largely stayed the same as the organization has gotten larger. And I'm so thankful it's been there because it's been easier and it's been simpler year over year. And our organization has grown around that cost because growth was a priority. And so I don't know, just anecdotally, choosing to secure trusted advisors is a hidden bottleneck for my own growth journey because it often requires you to have foresight and be uncomfortable with that expense given your revenue size sometimes because you're in the middle of your growth journey.
Yeah. Well, and often what I've found, at least in my business, is when you make those investments, you are often shortening the amount of time it takes you to reach the next
Yeah.
goal, right? Because you are paying sure an amount that may be more than you were expecting to, or more than you were comfortable, or more than before, but you were gaining all that expertise. So typically, you're able to make some decisions faster or maybe move in a different way that would not have been possible if you were trying to just chat GPT everything on your own.
Yeah. I've been seeing a lot of comments on LinkedIn, and I think when I use it a lot, AI tools, ChatGPT
Yeah.
is a really helpful advisor layer of things.
Yes.
But anecdotally, and I know you see this for accounting too, there's still so much wrong and misinformation that when you're trying to build something out of your knowledge set, you don't have the knowledge to know that it's disinformation
Yeah.
coming, that it's bad advice. So when I get it to write a marketing post or revamp a website or do a CRM automation, I have the knowledge to see immediately that it's wrong and then adjust. The practice next door doesn't have that. That's why I think these trusted advisors, even in the age of AI, there's going to be no replacement for the human element and for the person who spent years becoming an expert at that part of the business that you need help with.
Yeah. I think AI can be a great additional tool, right? As a
Yeah.
complement where it will answer a million questions in a row with infinite patience and it can help
Zero
you.
billable hours.
Your billable hour, exactly. And
Yeah.
it can help you maybe see something that you would not have paid attention to, right? A trend
Yeah.
or process data in a way that can be helpful. But you definitely should not be putting your tax return into ChatGPT, just putting that out there for anyone thinking about that. And the IRS does not care if ChatGPT was wrong, right? So those are my my little accounting disclaimers. Joshua, shifting gears a little bit. Like we've talked a lot about the hidden bottlenecks and what it takes to grow from 1 to $3 million and beyond. But you and I have a really special place in our hearts for kind of that scaling practice, right? That is something that I know we do well at Green Oak Accounting. That's something that you do well at Therapy Flow is serve a practice that is really in that growth mode.
Yeah.
And then you and I decided a couple of years ago that there just were not enough events in the space that were specifically geared to that growing practice. And so we together decided to do group practice con, which we did for the first time in 2025 and are about to do again in 2026. Why don't you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about it?
So much of my growth as a business owner holistically came by attending events early in my career for sales, for marketing, for business development. So I saw that venue where you get to interact with peers who are in the same zone of growth as you, and where you get to interact with experts that are trusted advisors, sourced, and who have specific answers to your questions, and two highlights from last year's group practice con that we're carrying again into this year. Number one is we really want practitioners who are really close or between this $1 to $3 million in revenue range. It's such an important growth stage, and we want anyone who comes to be in a room with others who are just in this growth stage. So not the new group practice owner or the solo practice. Those are important conversations. Both you and I have a lot of other spaces to meet those needs, but a great place for that. So that will happen at Group Practice Con again this year. And then roundtable discussions on day two. So after all of the experts present, teach, and share trending best practice advice, which will kind of share some genres of topics that we'll have this year, on day two, you get to interact with them live in a small group setting for a good chunk of time and just get contextual live feedback right then and there at the event. So there's kind of no replacement for this detailed learning format. And so when we do it again this year in 2026, it will be just an environment for transformation.
Yes, and we have the event scheduled for September 10th and 11th in
Yeah.
Chicago, Illinois. So beautiful, beautiful location. But really, the most important thing to me is we really were very intentional with the topics that we picked last year, and we're doing the same again this year, where we really wanted the topics to be very actionable. Right? There's a lot of great inspirational events, and certainly you will get inspiration at Group Practice Con. But we really wanted to have some actionable items that you could, attend a session and really take something back to your team, to your day, to your practice, certainly right away that you could
Yeah.
immediately implement in your practice. So what are some of the topics that we will be covering this year?
Yeah. So, goes across some of these bottleneck related pieces. So things like marketing, and keeping what are the, so much has changed. How do you get results for marketing in 2026? Financial best practices, looking, at how do you invest in your practice, given profit margins? How do you prepare yourself for a potential, growth or one day sale of your practice? Those related pieces. But there's other layers, HR. How do you lead your team? How do you retain your employees? How do you build great billing systems? And so, yeah, we're going to have a number of core topics to address sort of many of these departments that are happening inside of your practice that you need to level up, build systems, and have knowledge around as the CEO of your practice.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to our 2026 event. And I know that group practice owners will really get a lot of value out of the sessions that we have planned. Joshua, any last words on the event before we tell our listeners where they can go get a ticket?
I am a little biased because I live in Chicago, but September is truly the best month of the year to visit. It's warm, it's gorgeous out. The venue is the Chicago Athletic Association. It will be right next to the lake and Millennium Park. You'll be able to see the beam maybe out of your hotel window. And so we're going to have a lot of fun. We'll have an awesome welcome reception. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to walk away with some friends, and you're going to enjoy Chicago at its finest. You're going to be right downtown. We have an incredible room block rate. There's, if you're just looking for fun and a little bit of a getaway as a practice owner and all the content is an added bonus, which it is, that's what this is here for. And we've lined all of that up for you.
Yeah, you could definitely make a weekend out of this and stay an extra day or two to just really think about, processing the information and working on your business and thinking about what you're going to do next. I love to do that after conference, and Chicago is a great place to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Tickets are available today. Today is the day that tickets are available to the general public. We did sell out actually really quickly last year. Surprisingly quickly. We do have a few extra tickets this year compared to last year, but I definitely would not delay. If this is something that is of interest to you, I would get your tickets sooner than later because I do expect that we will sell out this year again. What's the best place to go find them?
Just grouppracticecon.com. You can put that in directly. You can obviously look at either Therapy Flow or Green Oak related assets and find as well, if you're, listening to this podcast, you're already there. Go to grouppracticecon.com. We'll have some early bird tickets available for you. And then once those sell out, it will be regular pricing through the event or until the event gets completely full.
Perfect. And really do not delay, right? I expect Joshua,
we got a lot of emails last year being like, I missed grabbing a ticket. Is there any left? And we're like, we're full. We're so sorry. So
we put as many people as we could in that room, and I'm glad to report we have a even bigger room this year. But when it's sold out, we have very little wiggle room at that point. So get your tickets now so that you can join us in beautiful Chicago in September.
We'll see you there.
Joshua, great to see you as always. Thanks for all these drops of value that you always give our listeners. If anyone is interested in working with Therapy Flow specifically, where can they find you?
itherapyflow.com, mitherapyflow.com, and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
Thanks, Julie.
That's it for today's episode of Therapy for Your Money. Catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Therapy for Your Money Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Green Oak Accounting on YouTube. Until next time.